I'm Professor Moricone, clinical lecturer in the Division of Arts and Sciences in the Biology Department at Iona University. Iona University is located at 715 North Avenue, New Rochelle, New York, and at Bronxville, New York, the home of the Kelly Center of Health Sciences. The purpose of this and subsequent interviews is for our students, faculty, staff, and prospective students to become familiar with the Department of Biology. The Biology Department at Iona has very distinguished faculty, as well as a great number of students involved in research. Today, I would like to begin with the Biology Department's current chairperson, Dr. Yourha Kang. Dr. Kang, welcome, and thank you for being with us today. Would you please tell us a little bit about yourself and how long have you been at Iona?
So I started at Iona in 2002, and so this is my 21st year at Iona. So I've actually been here quite a while and seen a lot of changes throughout those years.
Could you tell us a little bit about your background, where you did your undergraduate study and where you obtained your PhD from?
Sure. So I did my undergrad at Smith College, which is a small liberal arts women's college in Western Massachusetts. And then I went and I majored in biology. I actually thought I was going to major as a freshman in history, but I took a biology course and I just really liked it. And so I just kept going and I majored in biology. And then after college, I went straight to graduate school at Cornell University. That's where I got my PhD in plant biology. So at Smith, I actually learned that, hey, so I grew up in the city. I grew up in New York City. So, and when I went to Massachusetts, there were all this green. There was all this green and trees. I'm like, wow, they're plants. And so I took a couple of plant courses and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. I had no idea how fascinating these groups of organisms were. And so I majored in biology with an emphasis in plant biology. And then when I did my graduate work for a PhD, I went into a plant biology program. And that's where I got my PhD. And my thesis is really a molecular project, though. So I would consider myself much more of a plant molecular biologist rather than just a straight plant biologist. And I'm not a botanist. I don't know. So I don't know, what strange tropical plants, what their names are. But I could probably tell you basics of how they photosynthesize. So that's essentially where my expertise is.
So what did the research actually show? I mean, what was the significance of all of that?
Sure. So my thesis for graduate school was really thinking about the interactions between the pollen. So you all know about pollination. Like pollen lands on essentially a pistil, or to be more specific, the stigma of the pistil. And what I wanted to know is, how do they interact with each other? So if you put pollen from a different species onto a plant that is not the same plant, nothing happens, right? But if you put the pollen of the right species on the right stigma, all of a sudden the pollen grain starts to grow. So clearly there's something going on that interface between the pollen and the stigma, right? And so what's going on? How do they communicate with each other so that they know, right, that the right species has landed, and therefore you get the formation of pollen grain. And this was done in brassica, which can distinguish between different species, but also can even distinguish between own self, right? So some plants can self-pollinate, right? But other plants can't, and this one couldn't. So how can it distinguish between its own self versus other plants from the same species that will allow the pollen grain to grow, whereas from itself it won't? And so that's what my lab was interested in, and I was exploring what is on the stigma surface, the pistil surface, that allowed for that distinction, right, in terms of recognition. So that's what my thesis was sort of generally focused on.
So how long did it take you to That sounds like a lot. So how
So
long does
obviously,
it take
no,
you
so
to get a
that was,
PhD?
right, so that was what the lab was all about, right? So they were really looking at the molecular mechanisms behind that. And I was specifically looking and trying to discover genes involved in that process on the stigma side. But it took me 6 years to get my PhD, which is actually pretty typical of biology PhDs, right? I know that other PhDs take shorter time, but because I did a year of rotations for my degree, for that graduate program, that was pretty typical. 5-6 years is normal.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Very, very detailed.
Maybe I went into too much detail.
No, that's fine. That's great. That's what we're trying to accomplish by these segments. So now, with respect to your current courses at Iona, could you tell us something about the courses that you teach when you are teaching? Because obviously, as a
Sure.
chairperson, you have other responsibilities. So
Sure.
what are your typical courses that you would be teaching?
Yeah, so when I was hired to teach mostly biochemistry and plant courses, particularly Introduction to Botany. And so I've kind of morphed over the years. And so I've also taught, so right now I actually teach general biology, biochemistry, and cell biology. And so that's what I taught this year. When I graduated from my PhD, I actually did a postdoctoral fellow at UMDNJ, which is now called Rutgers Medical School, at their pharmacology department. And so I did a little, we actually worked on fungi, but because of that, I've also taught pharmacology here. And I've also taught a special topics course, molecular mechanisms of disease. And so so what's great about Iona, right, is that even though it's a university, the emphasis is still on undergraduate teaching and really focusing on the student. But we do have a smaller department, right? And so different faculty have to take on different roles. Teaching biochemistry was great, but then over the years, I've begun to teach cell biology, as well as that of general biology, right? So those are my big courses right now. And now I don't even teach botany anymore because we have a great, wonderful professor, Christina Andrak, who's actually a plant ecologist. And so she's now teaching botany, all right? And so we've taken on different roles depending on the needs of the department and of the students.
So are the courses that you teach, do they run every semester or do they swap out? Do they alternate?
Right, so biochemistry, so I actually teach two biochemistry courses plus the lab. So I actually teach a biochemistry course just for biology majors. And so this course, the students would have already taken as prerequisite courses genetics and cell biology. And so it's a leaning heavily on biology, even though it's very much a biochemistry course. This semester, I'm actually teaching a chemistry course. It's called Biochemistry 2, and it is more biology related in the sense that it covers a lot of metabolism, but it is a chemistry course, and so, but it's and it goes into a little bit more in depth just because it's the second semester of a year-long sequence in biochemistry, and so. In the biology department, biochemistry course, it's for biology majors with an emphasis on biology. With the Biochemistry 2 that I'm teaching this semester, it's chemistry and biochemistry majors. And even though both those classes require organic chemistry as a prerequisite, the biochemistry doesn't necessarily require biology, and so it's more chemistry oriented, but most of the students who take that class are biochemistry majors, and they have taken general biology and genetics, which is great. And so we can get really into the mechanisms of how your body works and how your body handles energy and breaks down stuff and builds up stuff, all that good stuff.
So obviously biology has a lot to offer just from one perspective, from one
Sure.
Instructor. So how about any special programs that biology offers or programs that they may have for our
Right.
students?
So obviously we have the major, and within the major we have 4 concentrations, right? So we have a regular general biology concentration, we have environmental and ecology concentration, we have the pre-physician assistant, pre-physical therapy concentration, and then we have the pre-med concentration, pre-med, pre-dental concentration. So they're very similar to each other in the sense that you have a biology core and you take certain biology classes, but then the biology electives you take, they're a little bit different, right, geared towards each of the concentrations. On top of that, we have the biology minor, right, so students who don't necessarily major in biology, but maybe are thinking even of going to the health sciences or the medical fields. Some of them will major in something else, but minor in biology. And then we have affiliations with a few other departments. So we're involved in the neurobiology minor. And I know that psychology is working really hard to make a neurobiology major, neuroscience major, excuse me. Then we also have a relationship with the sociology department with with the public health minor. And then a third one, we still have a minor in environmental studies, where we have relationships with religious studies, philosophy, English, a lot of the humanities classes. And so therefore, it's a great way for students who are interested in the green movement to get some experience, right, within that field. And so we do have relationships with other departments, right, so that students can take some biology, right, but then it's related to other fields